Hi, I'm Leslie Vernick, and I'm the author of The Emotionally Destructive Marriage and The Emotionally Destructive Relationship. And I want to talk to you today why staying neutral is not neutral in cases of abuse. One woman challenged her marital counselor because she asked him why he never confronted her husband on his abusive behavior. And he responded to her by saying, "I can't be your advocate because that would mean I was taking sides. I can't believe one person over another." He said, "I have to counsel someone in a way that won't drive them away." Now I get it, I'm a marriage counselor. And ideally, the goal in marriage counseling is to stay neutral and not take sides. But is that really biblical when it comes to serious and repetitive marital sin? Must we stay silent and not speak the truth because it may cause someone to get upset, walk away, or stop counseling? Well, I want to give you 3 reasons why I believe staying neutral is actually unbiblical and even dangerous to the individuals and to the marriage. The first reason is that we don't tell the truth. You see, we're not merely truth seekers as Christians, we're called to be truth tellers. And if we're working with someone who's caught in a repetitive and dangerous sin, and we minimize it, whitewash it, or ignore it, how are we really helping that individual? What I find even more incredulous is that most biblical counselors are trained to tell the truth when it comes to other sins. They readily tell a woman who's caught in adultery that she's sinning, or when she's struggling with bitterness and resentment toward her abusive husband, they tell her that God hates divorce and she's hard-hearted and they're to be reconciled, and yet they've never once directly told her husband that his behavior is abusive and even destructive, even though God's word is quite clear. The second reason is that neutral is not neutral when it comes to abuse and other serious sins. We know that both people in a marriage are sinners, but we must speak the truth, but it doesn't have to be done with scolding and shame. It can be done in love, but it must be done. And when we stay silent and refuse to name something for what it is, we're not neutral. What we're doing is we're silently colluding with the abuser that their behavior is not that bad. It's not grievous enough to speak out against it. Or even that we agree that if only their spouse would be more loving or more submissive or more respectful, they wouldn't act that way. But when we do that, we're sending the wrong message. And by our silence, we're agreeing with the abuser's interpretation of reality. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a modern Lutheran pastor during Adolf Hitler's regime in World War II, said this: "Silence in the face of evil is itself evil. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act." When the church refused to speak out against Hitler's abuse of the Jews, the abuse became culturally acceptable behavior. And the third reason is we fail to love. We do someone no favors when by our silence we collude with his deception that his wife's problem is the way he acts that way, or it's his wife's responsibility to fix this marriage. In Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tale, The Emperor's New Clothes, the king's most trusted advisors were afraid to tell him the truth about his new non-existent wardrobe. Instead, they allowed him to make a total fool of himself, parading around in his nakedness, believing that he looked fabulous. And it took a child who was willing to tell the truth to shake people awake to their fear and deception. The king's friends failed to love him well by their unwillingness to speak the truth. In 1836, 2 sisters in an upper-class Southern family, Angelina and Sarah Grimke, took a bold stance against their family practices, their church, and against their culture. First Sarah, then Angelina began to speak out against slavery, even though their family owned slaves and their church taught slavery was biblically sanctioned. They were attacked, persecuted, and were not even permitted to return to their own hometowns because people thought they were so wrong. But today, when we look back, we applaud these young women for their courage and bravery. Today, no Christian would defend slavery, even though the Bible doesn't speak directly against it. So I hope 100 years from now, no church would defend emotional abuse in marriage or turn a blind eye to a woman or man being treated as a slave or an object in their own home. I hope that 100 years from now, we look back on this time in church history and feel great shame for the way that we have failed to defend or speak out for the victim of abuse, and instead often empowered the bully at home to keep bullying. Martin Luther King said it best when he said it was not the words of our enemies that hurt the worst, but the silence of our friends. Let's stay neutral. Edmund Burke said all that is necessary for the triumph of evil is that good men or women, you and I, do nothing. You have a choice to do something. Speak out against abuse.